This is the Good Neighbor Podcast, the place where local businesses and neighbors come together. Here's your host, Jeff Gardner.
Welcome to another episode of the Good Neighbor Podcast. Today we have two good neighbors on the show today, Lauren Andrew and Amanda Kelly of Awake. Ladies, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this conversation, especially in the pre-show. You said it's about death, so I'm looking to talk about it. So let's get right into it. Lauren, we've met before. Amanda, we haven't quite formally met yet. But for the audience that doesn't know or hasn't heard, what is it that you guys do? What is Awake?
Awake is a small business in the end-of-life sector. We're considered a startup because we are currently small. We're growing across Ontario and expanding nationally in 2025. We are bringing sustainable resting places to families and to cemeteries across Canada.
So what an interesting concept, something that I hadn't heard of before speaking to Lauren a year ago or so. What is that? For people that don't know, what is a sustainable, did you call it resting place?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, what is that?
Sure. So some of us may have heard in the news in the past year, there's been a lot of discussion from the States around green burials and around natural organic reduction, human composting. There's this movement as we as consumers seek to make more sustainable choices in our lives. This movement is starting to work its way into the end-of-life sector as well. Things like human composting are not currently legalized in Canada, but the majority of Canadians currently choose cremation. So in Ontario, 86% of us choose to be cremated at the end of our lives. But until we started Awake in 2021, those 86% of citizens had no option to choose a green ending. Cremation itself, after someone chooses cremation, they're left with ashes in an urn or in a box, and those can be interred in a cemetery, but most families take them home. And most people say, 60% of people say, I'd really like my ashes to be in nature, or I'd really like my mom's ashes to be in nature. So many people plan to scatter them at some point, though they don't always get to that point because it's a little bit intimidating. But what people don't realize is that cremation ashes are extremely toxic to the environment. They're actually fatal to plants and to soil. So what we do is we have a patented soil-based formula that converts cremation ashes into living earth so that families can grow gardens. They can spread them in places in nature where they want to see wildflowers grow, or under trees that they want to see thrive over the decades to come. So we work with families across Canada to create planting kits for them. And we also work now with cemeteries to create entire spaces for communities to choose this green option.
First off, what a fantastic idea. So interesting. I had no idea that the ashes through cremation were toxic. I imagine many people don't know that. Mm-hmm. So what is it? Did you say you add a soil to it, or does it become more green during this? Do you change the cremation process?
Do you want to start and then I'll go the science?
Sure. So because to start, we are not a part of the actual cremation process. Our product is something that you're able to mix with cremated remains after the process of cremation has happened, so that you can take those ashes and bring them to neutral. And when you do decide to bring them to earth, whether that's through a scattering or a planting or a burial, it is a net neutral, sometimes positive effect on the environment that it's left in. So our product itself, it looks and feels like a compost. Soil compost mixture. And then Amanda, our little scientist, can kind of dig into how that actually works.
Yeah.
So science on me, Amanda.
Sure. Yeah. All about the science geek. So we call our mix Let Your Love Grow. And it is patented as a hybrid compost, is what it's classified as. And it does 4 specific things. So the first thing to know about cremation ashes is that their pH levels are extremely, extremely high. They're at the same level as bleach. So if you can picture yourself going into your backyard with a jug of bleach and pouring it into your garden and saying, I really hope mom's rose bush does well, you probably wouldn't do that, right? And now if we can think at a community level of 86% of our residents in our communities going to a cemetery and doing this and thinking, oh, I really hope that the green space and the gardens here do well, we realize that's not going to happen. So the first thing that our mix does is it drops that pH level significantly so that it can actually interact with the environment around it instead of shocking it with an 11.8 pH. The second thing that it does is that it is specifically designed for high sodium content to strain and drain out the sodium that is between 200 to 2,000 times higher than plants can survive. If you're a naturalist like me and you are avoiding herbicides and pesticides in your backyard, you might even in the summer take a jug of salt out to the backyard, and you might even pour it in the cracks of your cobblestones so that weeds don't grow in there, because salt is very toxic to plants. And that is the level of salt that we're talking about in our ashes as well. So we create a particular loaminess, and when working with cemeteries, a design so that salinity can basically strain out in a sustainable way. And then after that, we have particular bacteria that works with the ashes itself to work as a timed fertilizer to release the nutrients that are very, very concentrated in our cremation ashes gradually over time so they can be bioavailable to the plants. And the plants can actually use them as nutrients to grow rather than growing away from them, which is what currently happens.
Amazing. So when I pass, if I choose this route, I can help a tree grow, essentially. Like I can be a piece of the growth of a tree.
That's right. A tree, a wildflower garden, a particular lookout space that maybe your family has memories hiking to.
Cool. And did you guys come up with this patent?
So we work with the inventors who originally created this concept in 2009 to 2011. There's a whole team of scientists, international scientists, who have participated in getting this product to the point that it is. And something that we're really excited about is we are the only organization in Canada with sole distribution for the existing recipe for this product. But we are now actually working with those same scientists to use only locally foraged Canadian materials to create what we call Canadian classic Let Your Love Grow. That is 100% a Canadian blend so that the flora and the fauna are completely aligned with what our ecosystems are used to here in Canada.
And then also making our footprint that much smaller when it comes to actually creating the product itself. So trying to look at that eco-sustainability from all angles.
Yeah.
Amazing.
The whole mile concept.
I love it. I love it. What brings one to go down this road? Like, what is the story behind this? Like, did you wake up one day and thought, sustainability is important to me. Death is a part of my life. I'm going to make this better. Did you see a gap that was a problem for you? What brought you to doing this? Because it is unique.
Yeah.
I will say that at least.
So the first thing to know is that, number one, you don't just wake up and walk into the death space. And
you probably run away from it before you decide if you want to come back.
Yeah.
And number two, what we do is, and we meet with investors, we meet with innovators from across Canada, and every single person we've met has been amazed by how unique it is what we do. So what we do has a number of different pieces and components that we weave together. And the beauty of our partnership, Lauren and I are co-founders, is that we bring just the right amount of overlap and just the right amount of the independent pieces that helps us see everything holistically. So Lauren, why don't you start?
Yeah, because I think our stories were happening in parallel before we finally collided. But Amanda and myself worked together for, I want to say, close to 5 years. And while I was on maternity leave with my firstborn, I actually became an ordained reverend, mostly because, as you know, on the event side, I work with 50 plus couples a year. So great to actually marry them legally, not just help them design their floral patterns for their wedding. So I was talking with a friend and she let me know that she had a conversation with Amanda and she was working on a project. That's all the information that I knew, but she was interested in the fact that I could legally perform marriages and then also work with funerals and celebrations of life. So that's kind of how we decided to get caught up in the middle of COVID, basically, to have a conversation as to what have you been doing? And that's where Amanda's side of the story comes in and basically how Awake was formed.
Yeah. I think the other thing about Lauren's piece is Lauren comes from a family with Chinese ancestry where ritual and celebration are so ingrained in culture and just the importance of how we live life. And there is also a very different perspective of death in the Chinese culture. So growing up, Lauren didn't necessarily have the same fears that I think more of our very westernized perspectives bring to the topic of end of life. So Lauren's mind was already more receptive to these types of conversations than maybe some other people. So, and then at the same time that Lauren was pursuing her ceremonial side of her business, I was going through a very, very difficult place in life. And I had struggled with a lot of deaths happening of loved ones very, very close to me. And that challenged my mental health. I was also in a very difficult place in my personal life when it came to mental health and having thoughts about my own end of life. And my mom's a wills and estates lawyer. So I was raised to always be very organized about these types of plans. Like what are your final plans? Are they in writing? Have you thought through the different pieces? So I felt like I was living in a cloud of death for quite a long time. Every day I sat on my couch at the end of the day and I looked at a shelf of my loved ones' urns and I thought, this is supposed to be their happily ever after. This is their ever after sitting on my bookshelf. And I said, I'm not okay with that. They deserve better. I want better for them. And then I said, what happens one day when I'm gone? Then all of us, and I don't have children, all of us will be sitting on someone else's bookshelf. I don't know who. So that really sat with me in a very unpleasant way. And it niggled in the back of my mind just constantly, really. At the same time, you mentioned about sustainability. And I don't think, for me anyways, I never just woke up and was like, I support sustainability and I want to have a green business. It's just a lifestyle. For me, it's very much just part of a consumer lifestyle of ethics and my beliefs. So I would be going on hikes and I would be going on walks in the cemeteries with my dogs while in this cloud of death and thinking from a very different lens about how things could be done and realizing, oh my gosh, if more than 3/4 of us have cremation at the end of the day and we have these ashes, but we have these cemetery spaces that aren't designed for ashes. They're designed for tombstones and they're designed for caskets. And we have so many people who identify spiritually and ceremonially with nature, and we don't really give them that option. So I was putting those pieces together in my head, and I used to be a librarian. So research is very ingrained in my soul.
In everything you do.
In everything I do. I'm a very evidence-based person. And so I started doing the research of, well, how can we turn these ashes into healthy earth? How can we turn these ashes into a force and energy that gives back to the earth instead of just sitting on a shelf? And that's when I realized a lot of these scientific challenges. And I came across, there's not many people in the world who research this because it's very niche. So I came across the few that do research it. And I reached out to them blindly, said I would love to set up a meeting. Lauren and I had a conversation. I was kind of like, this is really left field, but this is where my thoughts are right now. What do you think? And because we'd worked together for a long time, we knew that our skill sets really gelled. She just looked at me and was like, Amanda, I'm in. Let's do it. So ever since then, we've evolved so much. Our business model has evolved. Our product has stayed the same, but evolved in ways that make it more accessible to people. And our brand has really matured. So we think of Awake really almost as her own woman, to be honest. She's very supportive. She has very high empathy, but she also helps people do their research. She helps people find answers to things that they've always wondered, but have been too afraid to ask.
Wow, hell of an answer. It's just it's a very interesting thing, and I think it's a beautiful thing as well. We come into this world, and then we're able to give back to it in the end. Yeah, that's a hell of a story. We ask, a big part of this show is education piece. Like that's a big part of my life, big part of my team's life, what we help our clients with. As in the world of marketing, although it is a common term, it's a very murky playground, a lot of misunderstandings. So a big part of the show is to help educate people on it, not just from our point of view, maybe more so from the expert information of our guests. So we asked about myths and misconceptions or confusions around the topic, around the industry. Now, you're so niche. This is so, what's the word that I'm looking for? New, at least nuanced. There's not a lot of these businesses out there, at least from my point of view and from what you just shared a minute ago, but still around the world of death, what your industry, I imagine there's a lot of misconceptions. How do people even start to have these conversations about the product you have? Do they even ask this? Is it part of our culture, et cetera, et cetera? So if we can help people take suboptimal information and replace it with more optimal information, they can make better decisions and hopefully increase the quality of their life in some way. Anything that you guys can clarify about misconceptions, confusion around your industry?
Yeah, I think I'll maybe talk to the more ceremonial, traditional aspect of death in general, and Amanda can probably talk to more about specifics regarding interment and all of those things. But from the hundreds of conversations that we've had, I think the one piece that remains true to every person that we've talked to that's been touched by death is that people aren't having these conversations or thinking about what they would like until they have to deal with it, which is very much, I had this conversation with my boomer parents where it's like, okay, we really need to discuss, not just to make you guys feel uncomfortable, but more so, where do you want to spend your time and money, and how do you want us to remember you in a way that is most comfortable? And I think where people get caught up is thinking that they have to do it the same way their parents did when their grandparents died. So because the topic of death has been as closed off in, I think, at least North America, versus what you would find in India or China or even Latin American countries where there's just much more celebration and discussion around it, is that people just don't know what to do. Someone passes away and they have literally hours to figure out what the next steps are.
So they follow
a specific
what they know. Plan that's been written for them instead of written by them.
Correct.
Yeah.
So it's kind of looking for, it doesn't need to be the same way it has been when, your grandfather died or your aunt died. It's what resonates with you. And then I think the other big piece is realizing that in the death industry in general, everything has a price tag and a lot of it is extremely expensive. And when people, and that's in my point of view, and Amanda has the numbers to support that, but when it looks at over 86% of Canadians choose cremation, well, a large percentage of that, aside from it being something that's traditionally or religiously accepted for that person, is really, it's much more affordable for the average Canadian. When you're looking at the price of full body burial that includes a casket and a cement liner and a tombstone, plus let's not even talk about the plot of what you're looking to purchase, you're upwards of $40,000, $50,000, $60,000.
Can be, yeah.
So it's one of those things where it's not sustainable for a family, let alone environmentally sustainable for the rest of us, where we're in this place where death real estate is going to take over. We're not going to have space for our dead after we get through a few years. And you look at a lot of European countries where you only own or rent your space for sometimes 2 to 5 years, just because there is no space. So the decisions that we make in our lifetime for how we die are extremely important. Not even, we can kind of take the whole part that makes us all feel sometimes a little scared and sometimes sick to our stomach to talk about. Let's just talk about what that means for everybody else when we've gone, the practicality part of us dying. So I think that there are more great resources out there. We've become one of those. It's really a humbling experience when we have become someone's first phone call when they've just experienced a death. So we've had many of these conversations, but I think what has been really beautiful is our partnerships with hospice and other foundations and organizations that especially Amanda's been sitting on, where people can come to a death cafe, sit, listen to all the different options and things that are available, or ask questions, or sit there quietly and say nothing at all, but just soak it in at their own fruition. But I think the main piece is people should just be going out of their way to research and speaking to people. I'm going to leave it with Amanda for all. She's got all the numbers, our librarian over here, when it comes to some of the misconceptions about cremation specifically and what the death industry is doing in terms of Canada and how much space we take up when we die. I think that's a really important piece of the story that we like to tell.
I can touch on that for sure, but I honestly was thinking very much along your lines. I was thinking that an important myth that I hope people can walk away feeling freed from is that there's one particular organization or one particular person who's going to tell you to do something one particular way. And we are all about tradition. We're not total untraditionalists. Like, we come from a ceremonial background. We come from understanding the importance of tradition, but we help people who want to keep the parts of tradition that are meaningful to them, bring a more sustainable, a more affordable lens that fits in their lifestyle. Because we meet a lot of people who say, I would go visit Dad at the cemetery, but I don't feel connected to him there. So then we get to say, well, where do you feel connected to him? And how can we recreate that for you? And how can we do that in a way that's affordable and green so that his final legacy is positive in this earth? So, I think that is the one really important myth from a consumer's perspective. From an industry perspective, I think one myth is that this industry is staying the same and will always stay the same. We are rare in that we are a small startup in the death industry, but there are more of us coming. And if you look at success stories like Irene Cremation Services, who has secured over $4 million of investment from all female investors, scaled across Canada. She's born and raised in Barrie. She's scaled across Canada. She's now expanding into Florida, and she provides end-of-life virtual funeral home services and cremations from the comfort of your couch or wherever it is that you are grieving, so that you don't have to go into an uncomfortable place. You don't have to feel like you're being sold to. So we feel really lucky to be part of this predominantly women-led little group of startups who are looking at death differently, and not because previous generations have done it wrong, but because people today want options, and we deserve to have options. If we're choosing cremation, then some people may want a metal urn that is buried in a cemetery, and that's perfectly fine as far as we're concerned. But some people may want a green option. And if you do want a green option, you deserve to have it. So that's where we're starting. And we have some exciting things in the pipeline when it comes to other technologies and supporting other choices that people make at end of life. Yeah. So those are a couple myths. And the science, I think the science of ashes is a really important one. And like our Instagram feed blows up sometimes with questions about that. Like it is a myth that cremation ashes are healthy for your garden.
They are not ashes.
Cremation ashes are not ashes. They are powderized bone matter that's extremely concentrated. They're not a biomaterial anymore. Anything that was a biomaterial has disappeared in the fire. So cremation ashes themselves are more similar to fossils. So archaeologists have actually unearthed cremation ashes from over 5,000 years ago that are sitting in the ground exactly how they were buried 5,000 years ago. They haven't biodegraded. They haven't dispersed. They're not going anywhere. And to some people, that brings them comfort. To other people, they like the idea of becoming part of nature again.
Mm-hmm.
So that is one other myth. And then I will say, I know this isn't a question that you've specifically asked, but Lauren kind of touched on it. We have had hundreds of conversations with people across Canada in the past couple of years. And one thing that really resonates with me is the number of times someone has found us and said, I've done my research. I've done my research. I've done my homework. I've done my reading. It led me to you. To me, this seems like the only option that actually works. And I know from the science in Canada, we are the only green option for cremation ashes. And I don't say that with ego. I just say that from a scientific perspective. But I do encourage people who have a particular vision or wish in mind to do their research, because there are other options. Like there are compostable urns that are compostable, fully compostable, and we are compatible with products like that. But at the end of the day, if the urn composts, the ashes are still in the ground. So have an understanding of what it is you really want and let yourself be creative and free with what that is. Ask yourself how that might tie into family traditions. Is that visiting a cemetery? Is that a particular tree on a hike that you've done at Springwater Provincial Park? It's perfectly legal to scatter ashes at provincial parks and national parks. And then do your research on how you can make that wish come true.
Yeah, this is one of the things that I enjoy so much about these types of conversations, as you just said, like somebody needs to go through their research to find you. And my first question is, if I don't even have the question in my head to ask, no research is going to follow, right? So to have these types of conversations, to get that information out there, that education out there, to plant the seed for me to be like, oh, there are more options available. Now go down that path and see where it takes me. I love that you guys are doing that. And kudos to you for taking this on and being the first in Canada. That's amazing. I'm curious about two things. What is a death cafe? Number one. Okay. I held on to that for like 10 minutes. I've been wanting to ask.
So patient, Jeff.
Yeah.
I told you, you might have to rein us in.
So death cafes, they come in many shapes and sizes, but they're just basically a very casual, they're organized. So they're not like a pop-up out of nowhere. Usually a group will organize one. We've been meaning to do one for a long time, but just haven't had the chance to, where you have a space. A lot of the times it's a cafe, could be a bar, could be someone's backyard.
McLaren Art Center
in Barrie has done a few. Mm-hmm. And it's just a very open to the public space that allows people to come in, and either there are organized speakers and topics that will be discussed, or it's just people in the same space willing to be vulnerable with their questions that they may have at one point or another thought was a dumb question, right? You can come there with all of your questions. Like, where, like when it comes to wills, for example, the nice thing about having Amanda's mom as a estates attorney is we have a lot of the background in terms of when you have your end of life asks in your wills, you should also have it in your living will, because when you die, there's a high percentage chance that your family isn't going to read your will until after your interment has happened, or until after you've chosen burial over cremation. And there's been many times where it's like, Dad wanted cremation and we just did a full body burial. And people don't know that until after the decisions and the choices have been made. So anything from questions from wills to, the MAID program in Ontario, anything to hospice care or how to have
grief.
green burial. Yeah, grief related questions, therapy. It's just a very open, non-judgmental space for anyone who just wants to be able to learn or listen or speak.
Feel not alone.
Yeah, it's really beautiful.
That's a big part. Yeah, I can imagine it is. How do people find out about this? They just Google online Death Cafe locally near me or something?
Yeah. So for death cafes specifically, I would suggest there's a very, very large acronym, and I'll tell you what the group is called. The North Simcoe Muskoka Hospice and Palliative Care Network. So they're a team of hospices across the region, nurse practitioners across the region, counselors, and they have been organizing a few death cafes. Collingwood Library has had one. McLaren Art Center has another one coming up, I believe. And I think there may be one coming to Alliston soon. So, and I think it's important to note all of us will lose someone at some point in our lives. But there's also a thing called anticipatory grief. So if you are just really, really chronically fearful or anxious because you know that time will come and you don't feel prepared, these are people that you can speak to, and they're trained and they're very knowledgeable and they're so kind. They're so, so kind. And they're there to speak to. So yeah, I would just research like Barrie area, Alliston area, Collingwood, Death Cafe, or palliative care support, and you will find them.
Awesome. And then what is the net result of the full body burial that you guys have brought up a couple of times? Like in the most traditional sense, I don't know if there's 10 different ways to do that, but we know the result of these ashes now, that they can be toxic and they're not bioavailable. As you said, they don't help nature. What happens if I put my body in the ground?
Yeah. So first thing to note, there's a couple ways to do full body burial, right? There is in a lacquered casket, in a cement lined grave, or in a mausoleum. And then there are what they call green burials or natural burials, which are either in a plain wooden or wicker casket, or a body shroud, so a cotton or a bamboo shroud. So fully biodegradable, but still full body. So there's two types of full body burial. And I am a licensed funeral planner, I'll let you know. So I promise I know what I'm talking about. So there's two types of full body burial. That said, so obviously one is biodegradable, the other isn't. That said, we're big on numbers. I'm definitely big on numbers. And something that's interesting when it comes to the math in Canada. So we have 330,000 people annually who pass away in Canada every year. If all of those people were to choose a full body burial, it would require
non-natural.
Even natural, because your body is still your body's the size of your body
until it's
yeah. Mm-hmm. So if all of those people were to choose a full body burial every year, it would require 77 acres of land annually for us to place our dead. Mm-hmm. If the same number of people, so all Canadians who passed, were to work with one of our cemetery partners that we're creating eco-friendly scattering gardens with, it would require half of an acre every year for all of them. So from 77 acres to half an acre. And we are talking about land use space, but in addition to land use space, we're also talking about maintenance. There's a lot of water that's required to water the grass in traditional cemeteries. There's a lot of human capital and gasoline that goes into mowing those lawns. There's lost property taxes when it comes to urban planning for municipalities. So there are all kinds of factors that come into these decisions. And Lauren and I have municipal backgrounds. So one of the reasons we're actually going to present to a city council next week, and we're working with 3 other cities across Ontario already to implement these eco scattering gardens. And there's all kinds of reasons why different municipalities are choosing this. Another important one when it comes to the land use is that, as we all know, our towns and particularly our cities are running out of spaces to put living people, let alone dead people. And municipalities in our budgets, we're often thinking about how we care for our living people, and there hasn't been much thought about how we care for our dead people. So one of the things that happens is when cemeteries, traditional full body cemeteries, run out of space, because they inevitably run out of space. Citizens from these communities that we've spoken to, they've lived their whole lives in that particular town. And now at end of life, their family has to take them somewhere else to be laid to rest. And it's heartbreaking, and it is inconvenient, and it's not healthy for the grief of that family moving forward, because they're not mourning them in a place where they're connected. Yeah. So we're looking at all of these reasons why creating a sustainable solution is better for communities, it's better financially for cities, and it's better many times for our grief as families and individuals.
I'm curious, as the death, first off, great response to all of these questions, but I'm curious, since you guys are the death experts and you're talking about planning in advance, have you guys made your choice?
Yes.
And can I ask what those are?
Sure. Do you want me to start?
We
we want to know, like, what are the death experts using to deal with their own death? We're curious.
We're committed to this topic, as you know.
Yes. Our next stage in our business plan is to open Ontario's very first naturalized cemeteries. So what that is, because we get asked that a lot, is we are looking to help preserve space the way that it is. So in our minds, it would be lovely to have something that is treed like a forest with a very naturalized path in which you could select, your family tree. And then that tree could host all of your family members in perpetuity for forever. There's never going to not be room at the family tree, because with Let Your Love Grow, we have infinite capacity to have all of your loved ones there. So before we die, Amanda and I are opening a cemetery in which it feels like your favorite place to take your dog on a hike. It reminds you of all of those memories that you had with your kids or your grandparents at that provincial park. And instead of taking a space, mowing all the trees down, giving you a nice flat green space, we are keeping it exactly as nature had intended and allowing people to go back to earth.
Mm-hmm. So for me, I'm all about the family tree. I want a nice big, maybe a willow, maybe a maple, but I want a nice big tree for me and my parents, my siblings, and all of our dogs. Lauren is very much about water features. Mm-hmm. So she would like a big family stone that's kind of overlooking a pond or a river. So these are all requirements in our wish list as we talk to potential donors and also potential sellers of acreage.
Amazing. So are you guys going to be a part of the cemetery that you've created, or you're going to create it for us and then find your place elsewhere potentially?
We are the us. I can say that at this point, I live in Oro-Medonte, and I have for almost 6 years now, and it has become home. And in going through our wills, because we have, myself and my husband have 2 small children, trying to decide where we would go, and we currently don't have an option.
And your older family members have moved to Aurelia.
Yes, and they're all in Aurelia and the surrounding area. So now everyone's, I tell my parents, with love, I am not driving to the GTA to visit your tombstone. So let's find something where I'm more connected to you here anyways. So my brain is telling me that this is where I would like to be. But at the end of the day, we hope to be able to offer this option to all Canadians. We hope that there's a naturalized cemetery that is available for all people within, let's say a 30-minute radius from where you live. It'd be great to have that option for people who are connected anywhere. And I think that in our area specifically, there are many people from the GTA that their connection is still up here because it was family cottages. Their grandparents lived up here. So it's not just so much people who live here locally all the time, but we have a very strong urban connection, which is why we created the retail product the way we did, so that you could share cremated remains of a loved one between, your favorite ficus plant in your condo. Myself and my parents have our family dog split up between 3 of us. She's on our house at the windowsill right now. So I think it's very important for people to have that option too, where if you want to have someone close with you and you're not sure yet, which is kind of the beauty with cremation, is that, we never are done with our grief cycle. It just has different milestones and changes as you go through life, where maybe you weren't ready to go through an interment conversation 5 years ago, but now that you've had that urn or you've had that plant and you're ready to move on to that next stage to have them have a final resting place, you're not rushed to make those choices. And I think that is one of the beautiful things for people who do decide to go with the cremation route.
Fascinating stuff. I'm looking at the time here. We've got through like 3 of 9. So let's pivot from business and learn a little bit more about you guys. Again, great answers. It's fascinating stuff what you guys do. I love the philosophy behind it, why you're doing it. Especially Amanda, your situation, just looking, I just have this picture in my head, me sitting on like my living room couch and just seeing urn after urn in front of me. How would that impact me? What would I do with that information? I don't know. I don't think I would be as intuitive and as innovative as you were. So kudos to you for that. But it's amazing how through these challenging experiences in life, so much growth and so much positivity can come out of it if we choose. So I don't think it's just a given. I think it is a choice. But let's talk about you guys. So you guys are entrepreneurs. Most entrepreneurs will say their business is their baby. And that's a great thing. A lot of entrepreneurs really love what they do, even though they slave away at it every day. But I will not accept the answer when I ask you what you do for fun. You guys say, we love our work. There has to be more to life than that. So what puts a smile on the 2 of your faces when you're not talking about death?
Yeah, I will say, as a co-founder, my work is entwined in my life, is what I would say. So when I'm doing things for fun, I'm hiking new places, I'm figuring out camping spots. And then when I'm in those forests, I just can't help but think, like, wouldn't it be wonderful to be laid to rest here or to visit a loved one here? Or I'm taking inspiration from things that provincial parks have done that would make really great community hubs in a forested resting place. But yeah, so I spend a lot of time outside. I spend a lot of time with my dogs. I have 2 rescue dogs, and we do training all the time because they're a handful. So they teach me a lot. I think dog psychology is fascinating and can reveal a lot about us as well.
I agree.
And then I'm also a chocoholic. So whenever I am visiting somewhere for a conference or whatever reason, I try to do something for myself. And the things that I try and do for myself are visit a chocolate shop, a local chocolate shop, and a library. So reading with some chocolate and probably a hot chocolate as well. That's my happy place. Yeah.
I dig it. Before we move on to you, Lauren, I'm a big reader. I like chocolate. It's good. Ice cream is my Achilles heel for sure. But what kind of books do you get into? Anything to recommend to the audience? Could be fiction, nonfiction, something that's had a major impact on you. What do you got? I want to write it down. See if I can get into it.
I don't know if she's your cup of tea, but I'm big on female forward detective stories.
Okay.
So I am in love with Deanna Raybourn is the author, and she has 3 different series that I adore, all of them. I just finished last night one that was called Killers of a Certain Age. 4 women who were career assassins. They're in their 60s and they're retiring until someone puts a hit on them. So anyways, I love the female heavy navigating very difficult situations and being creative. And I love good writing. I love words. As much as it frustrates Lauren sometimes, I'm like, oh, I need the exact right word for this.
She's only rejigged the website about 14,000 times since we started.
Words are powerful. It's the way we communicate. It's hard to you feel something, it's hard to communicate it with our words. Our communication, our language is limited. So, if you can expand your vocabulary, maybe you can express yourself a little better. So I agree with choice of words. How about yourself, Lauren? What are you into? What puts a smile on your face?
Well, I have 2 children now. So
big smiles there.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they're little.
Very little.
So one is going into big kid school.
Yes.
Which is what, grade 1?
Kindergarten.
Is that big kid school? Kindergarten. Okay.
Yeah. And he starts baseball. I know we had a conversation about baseball the last time we chatted. So he's starting baseball tonight if the weather figures itself out. And besides that, my love and passion is traveling. So now that I have kids, it's a little less overseas because 4 plane tickets is a lot. So we're trying to get to know a little bit more about like the local places around us. My husband happens to work in parks. So it's nice to kind of see the number of parks and beaches and places that are just within a half an hour to 45 minutes of us. But anything to do with sports, anything to do with keeping my kids busy and happy is what I'm doing.
Lauren will be down at the Raptors games, or she's planning a big trip to Portugal. And it's not just any trip to Portugal. It's her sister's wedding, and it's like incredible off the beaten path locations. And yeah, she's a planner.
I can't help
she plans
myself.
ceremonies and events. So she does everything next level.
Love it. I love it. It's great. So we talk about hard things on the show. We were just talking about a moment ago from your personal experience, Amanda. That challenge you were going through led to something that I imagine, I'm not going to speak for you, but certainly the way I've interpreted it has turned into a purpose, a way of living, not just a business, but a way of existing at a higher level. And it seems like through our challenges, sometimes the more growth can come from it. To a certain degree. So we talk about hard things on this show, trials, tribulations, hardships, see what we can learn from them, because I think there are still many minds out there to stuff our quote unquote failures down, failed relationship, failed business, whatever it was, non-success in this thing, keep this down, especially when you take a gander at social media in any real sense. You'll find that it's often polished, not quite real. Best cars, the best women, the best men, the best. And I don't think it's a real depiction of what our human experience really is. I think it's focusing too much, in some sense, not broad strokes, but in some sense, too much on the pleasures of life. And I think we're missing a lot of the human experience without sharing our hardships. I do counseling on the weekend at an addictions facility, and those are all hard conversations. And they're just beautiful experiences. Often very emotional. There's a lot of tears, but there's a lot of growth that comes from that. A lot of life change comes from that. And that has had a drastic impact on me to change my life, to embrace my hardships more so. Certainly the hardest things in my life had led to the most growth. I can say that for sure. So we like to ask the guests on the show, any trials, tribulations, hardships that you've been through that when you went through it probably sucked in the moment, as hard as a symptom, right? It doesn't feel very good. But when you look back in hindsight, you wouldn't remove that ingredient from the recipe that is you, because it's led you to enjoying your life the way you do now. Anything come to mind?
Oh God, we need a whole other podcast episode.
Yeah, we do.
And
yeah,
Cole's notes then.
high level, we're in death. We're here because the bottom, being at your rock bottom when the rocks in your life are gone, is a terrible, terrible place to be. And for me, at least, awake is my rock now. And being able to really think about how you can make those ones you loved proud, and what it was about them that made them a rock for you, and how you can try and be that or put that out into the world, is the best form of legacy and is the most rewarding and most honorable tribute I think that we can pursue as family members. So that's one. And then Did you want to go next?
Sure.
Okay. I have another. It's slipping my mind right now.
I think that, like Amanda said, we're in a very interesting space where we have had many. Do you want to go first? You want to get off your mind? You do it.
Okay. So the other one I was just going to say from a business perspective in terms of business challenges. So we mentioned at the beginning, Awake has evolved, right? As soon as we had this epiphany, we knew we had the pieces, and there's a lot of pieces, and we knew we had them. So we incorporated in July 2021, which in other people's minds was probably like at least a year too early, at least. But we knew it was a path we were committed to. And it took us a while to figure out how all of the pieces fit together in the right way. And it has only just clicked this past fall. So fall of 2023, everything clicked. So from July 2021 to fall 2023, that's 2 years of a lot of lessons learned, a lot of slugging it out. We initially launched Awake in the B2C space. So our planting kits that we sell to families across Canada, and we still have those, and they're great. And we now work with veterinarian partners who sell them to their pet parents. And that's something we will always continue with. But we realize that's not where we can make the most impact. And one of my mentors, because I've done a few different innovation incubator programs, and I did one that's federally funded based in BC called Foresight Canada. It's just for clean tech companies. And one of the things that he said to me is find the product market fit where you're doing 20% of the work and getting 80% of the reward, instead of 80% of the work and getting 20% of the reward. And I was like, oh my God, I feel like that's what I've been doing. How do I switch this? So we started thinking about, and it's funny because we're from municipal backgrounds. So we started thinking about where is this problem? Like individual consumers can make this choice, but it takes a lot of education, a lot of conversations, and that's what we've been doing. But where is this problem? An even bigger pain point. And that's where we started our conversations with municipalities. And today we've reached out to 5 municipalities and 4 are on board as clients. And that, from any salesperson's perspective, is insane numbers.
It's a pretty high close rate.
Yeah. So we know that we're on the right track. We're launching this summer with a formalized program that we're calling the Municipal Cemetery Adoption Program. There's lots of plans for expansion of that into nonprofit areas as well. But so that was a hardship for me, because one of these incubator programs I did, the CFO of the organization actually sat down with me after this huge pitch competition to 500 people, and it was on TV. And he sat down with me a couple of days later and said, Amanda, your pitch was so good. And I think what you're doing is incredible. You are going to change the world, but you're too early. And I said, oh, I was coming to you for advice, right? And how to juggle my personal life because I have no income. And how to juggle my personal life with my growing business as a CFO. I was hoping for your advice. He said, yeah, you're too early. You're 10 years too early. My advice for you is to go and get a full-time job and to wait it out. And it took me 24 hours to process that. And that was a big challenge. And then I just thought, no, no, we have the right pieces. They're maybe not in the right order right now. The Rubik's Cube isn't quite fit the way it needs to be, but it's there. And I'm going to crack this puzzle. And that was what led to that conversation with my other mentor. And now we're in a completely different area where we're going to be working with municipal governments across Canada. And so I do think challenges make us look at things differently, and they push us. And sometimes we need that push.
It's an amazing thing. I appreciate you sharing that story. Quick answer. I think it's an easy question. Do you think that this would have happened without those earlier challenges in your life, looking at the urns sitting on your shelf like that? Had you not had those series of things happen, you don't think this would have been created?
Nope.
Yeah. So I really want people to hear that, because a lot of us allow our challenges to become burdens, weights on our shoulders that bring us down rather than open us up to the world. I think that obstacle can become the way of your life. Through that obstacle can become a new avenue for a higher quality existence. How about you, Lauren? You got anything to add to that?
I just think that hardships are a necessity, and we're all going to have to go through them. And how we choose to approach and go through, over, under, around all of the hurdles that we're going to get throughout our lifetime is just the story that our kids and friends and people that we touch will be able to talk about us about. Awake would not be here if Amanda and I didn't have our own hurdles with trying to navigate our own personal relationships with one another, being constantly told that we are too early in a very male-dominated industry, being two younger females in the space. So I think that with that, aligned with everyone else's personal lives, I experienced a lot of death at the same time that Amanda experienced a lot of death. And is, in my mind, what do I want better for my children has what's pushed me. Different but the same in terms of Amanda's pieces. Like, how can we just leave the earth better? One of our internal slogans is "You only die once." So
make it count.
Make it count.
Yeah. Yeah. With that, you only live once. Because I am so curious about death, and I think you guys know a little bit more about this than I do, although it certainly directs a huge portion of my life. You guys have alluded to it a couple of times. In the West, again, I'm using broad strokes. This isn't for everybody. There's obviously, exceptions to the rule, but I think a lot of us either completely avoid thinking about death, the conversation about death, or there is a negative connotation to it, like it's the end, it's permanent, it's not good, it's blackness on the other side type of thing. We get these fearful thoughts in our head, so we avoid that discomfort. How would you like us to view death if you had it your way?
I think the best way for you to view death is the way that you hope it's going to be. So my husband is very Canadian. His ancestry is German, Scottish, English, all that good stuff. Coming from a Chinese background on my mom's side, I grew up having these amazing dinners and people getting together, and we call it Tomb Sweeping Day, and it happens every spring, where we go and visit. Very similar to how people would celebrate the Day of the Dead. So I grew up in a much different environment when it came to death. We celebrated those people every year on their death day. We look forward to getting together with all of our living relatives to celebrate the lives of those who have passed. And I remember the first time, after a couple of years of us dating, my now husband came to the grave on Tomb Sweeping Day, and he cried. And he's probably going to hate this because I'm showing this video later, but he's like, this is amazing. Like, this was so much fun, such a great experience. You get to see people that we haven't seen in a long time, and nothing about this is sad or depressing. And of course, it probably was the first year or two after that person had passed. But now it's just become one of those things where it forces you into a space where you can begin to celebrate life after loss. And I think that there's a lot of cultures out there in certain religions that have really amazing ways to do that. And I think, without appropriating, it's not bad to go out there and do your research and see what other cultures and people are doing and find something that you connect with, because it's okay for you to also do those things. And
create a legacy that works with your beliefs and lifestyles.
Exactly. So when his grandfather ended up passing away, he knew that he didn't want to go to the cemetery to visit all the time. So we asked for, which you can do, you can ask for your own set of cremated remains. And he planted a ZZ plant that sits in our house. And I laughed because I said, what plant do you want to use? He goes, the laziest plant there is out there, because that is totally my grandfather. Like, he doesn't want water. He doesn't want sun. He's just going to vibe in the corner. And we call it the Douglas fern. And that's just what he does. And it's just, you have your coffee there in the morning, you sit beside him, you read your book, and that's where he feels the most connected.
Yeah.
So I do agree with you. There's people just don't know what you don't know. And if you've gone your entire life where you go once a year and you put roses on your grandmother's grave and that's all it is to you, then I think it's just time to kind of sit with yourself and say, what would I want my best friend to do if I was gone? And then that's probably where you align with.
Mhm.
It's great. It's great advice. Yeah, I think it's just super helpful for people to have this information, to know that there's different options out there. Yeah, beautiful options. My one quick follow-up is, if I interpreted that correctly, that is about the experience of death. So there has, like you said, your experience after loss. So somebody has died. Is there a way in the West that maybe we're losing value on, or maybe we're short-sighted about how death can affect our current life, like pre-loss?
Yeah.
Without being like, okay, somebody's now died, I can listen to this conversation and change my decisions based around the loss.
Yeah.
But prior to the loss, can viewing death in a different way change our current day-to-day?
Yeah. So I think that people are afraid of the unknown.
I would say definitely.
Yeah, I think we're wired to be afraid of the unknown. So sometimes the biggest unknown can feel like, and I have these conversations with people. I have conversations with, I volunteer with Dying with Dignity Canada. And sometimes people can say, I would really like to have medical assistance in dying, but I'm afraid of having the conversation with my family because I'm afraid they won't support it. I'm afraid they won't agree with me. So sometimes that unknown can feel like the scariest. And then once you've crossed that bridge, then it's the next unknown that feels the scariest. And then it's the next unknown, right? But once we actually are brave enough to step towards, close enough to the unknown to think, okay, I can figure this out. I have options. I can look at what my options are. Even if I don't do anything about it yet, I'm not ready. Let's just figure out what my options are. Okay, let me take that back and digest it. Now it's not quite so unknown, right? Well, if we pursue this avenue, then what happens? So having the conversations, I think it starts with your own research is what we find. It starts with people doing their own research in a safe space, like on their couch with their favorite blankie around them where they feel safe, starting to do their own research, and then starting to have those conversations with the people who are in their lives. And that's a really, really important step. And then deciding what are the things that they want. And once people know, I'm going to be under the cherry blossom tree in the backyard, and I know that brings me comfort. It also brings my daughter comfort because she knows we've had a lot of moments with that cherry blossom tree. And she knows that's where I want to be, because there's a lot of this grief, this survivor grief around what would they want. And unless you have those conversations, you don't know what they want.
Coming from a planner's perspective, and I know this might sound funny, but people find solace and comfort when things have been planned and discussed.
Absolutely. It doesn't sound funny at all. We like things organized, planned out recipes.
Exactly. Everything from your wedding to your will, to what you're doing over the weekend and what you're doing at your trip. To have a plan.
We pre-plan celebrations of life with people as well.
Correct. Just having that plan and knowing that exists makes the unknown far less scary.
Oh, yeah.
And what people need to do to help them live a more exciting life. I just think back to all of my traveling. I am that person with, when I leave my parents with a letter that says, if anything happens, my parents have the ability to go to the hospital for my kids. This is where the will is located, this, and this. Okay, have a great time. So now I can go and worry that everyone else has been taken care of. Mm-hmm. So I think that, as uncomfortable as it may be, because we all may not have had parents or family members or friends to talk to about this up till now, there's nothing stopping you from thinking about it now. And I think that once you are able to think about it, be uncomfortable, and come up with a plan, then there's just more life to be lived. Because there's not this thing that's nagging at you in the back of your head. And I know we're getting close to the end here, but the one thing that always stands out to me is the conversation we had with a father about pre-planning. And all he said to us was, I've got daughters for that. I don't have to worry about it. I've got daughters for that. And then I remember turning to his daughters and saying, I am so sorry. Because now it's all on another person, just because somebody else doesn't want to have to talk, think, or deal with it. So I think that if people can get over the fact that they might be uncomfortable, you will grow from that in so many other ways. From I planned my death. No, it's like you will live lighter. You will breathe easier. Your shoulders, you'll stand taller once all that's been just dealt with.
That's where I was hoping you were going with that, because even though I haven't planned out my last day, a lot of my life has been, it's much more intentional because I know I have an end date stamped that I don't know when it's coming. So, what did you say? You'll just live lighter, essentially, when there's less uncertainty. When Amanda, when you were saying you butt up against one unknown and then another unknown, that's life from day one. It's like life is a gamble from day one to the last day. If we can have a bit more conversations, learn from a bit more, know that we do have an end date. So to do it, if you want to do something, do it. Don't wait, and start, solving your own uncertainties just by asking questions and learning a few things and moving into discomfort a little bit. And a lot of that growth is found there. So fantastic information. Last two questions for you ladies. First, let's get this one over quick because it's an easy one. How can people contact you? What's the best way to reach out to you guys?
Yeah, the best way to find us is on our website, which is awakeashes.com. We're also on Instagram and Facebook.
Beautiful. Instagram, Facebook, awakeashes.com. And then here's the last one. I don't put this in the questionnaire because too many people try to script their answers, and we don't like scripted answers on the show. So I only talk about a handful of things on this show. And really, this show is like an extension of my life. I only talk about a handful of things in my life. You'll have entrepreneurship in there. You'll have health and fitness in there, purpose, impact, mentorship. And so this isn't a two-parter, but it has two pieces of this. Those 5 things that I talked about. So I've been very lucky to have some phenomenal mentors in my life that have changed the trajectory of my life entirely, like a full 180 from who I was in my early 20s to now creeping up on 40. And 22, 23, I was able to connect with this mentor. She's a phenomenal businesswoman. She just lives a great life. And she was the first one to plant the seed on me about impact. And so much about that is related to death. She said, have you thought about your impact up to this point at 23? I'm like, no. She said, well, maybe it'd be prudent of you to start thinking about that. What has been the net of your impact on this planet, on your family? Has it been good, indifferent, negative? And now be intentional about today, because you may not be there tomorrow. And then for however long you are here, what do you want your impact to be on the world? Because without a doubt, you are impacting the world. I think the ripple effect of our actions and or inaction goes way beyond our line of sight. You could put a smile on one person's face that could maybe affect 150 people over the next day. We don't know. The point is that we are connected in some way, and our impact is significant, hopefully significantly positive. So we like to ask the guests on the show, what do you two want your impact to be?
I think on my end, I want my impact. The impact on my children has been a lot bigger than I thought it was going to be for my lifetime. I never grew up dreaming about being a mom, and yet here I am. So I want them to, when I am gone, to remember that I allowed them to live a life that gave them as much freedom to do and feel and experience all the things they wanted to, in a way that there was as much fear removed from that as possible. So I think that is the biggest impact I want to have on my children. But the amazing part of this job, which has gotten me to be more in love with what I do with the weddings, is that I actually have the ability to impact an entire family's life moving forward and dealing with them in the most important milestones of their life, from weddings to the funerals and all of the things in between. So I think if I am able to be an ear and someone who can point someone in the right direction for the advice that they seek, not so much telling them what it is that they should be doing, but helping them find the ways that they can do things the way they want them to be done. I hope that there's every single person that we've had a conversation with, yourself included, and all the wonderful people that I'm yet to meet, when they call us and they're going through the most difficult times in their life, they can say, wow, like it was just so nice to be able to talk to somebody who really cared. And I think that's the big piece. And just like you said, everything we do, including when we die, is going to impact the people that come after us. So if we are able to help people think a little bit more about how to be intentional themselves and how we can help them get the most from their life from being intentional, that's what I hope to do to those around me.
Amazing. Amanda?
For me, I would like my ultimate impact to be helping Canadians to be in harmony with end of life and with the earth. And that means all Canadians. We support people from all generations and ages, from atheists to Orthodox, and we help them to create what they believe is their happy ending. And I hope to be able to bring that as an option to every Canadian.
Amazing. Dang. Some mic drops there, ladies. It's been a pleasure talking to both of you today. And correct me if I'm wrong, Lauren, you are involved with Shannon's son, right? In some way?
We both have the absolute honor and privilege of being Sharon's actual first phone call. So it's that's a moment I will never forget.
Man. Well, you guys are doing good work out there. I love that you two are young. You're building a business. You're having an impact from multiple different facets. Just a business that can create income is positive, but a business that can create income, have a great impact on a family, have an impact on our green space. So many boxes you guys are checking. We're all rooting for you. It's been a great conversation getting to chat with you guys. Thanks for coming on the show.
Thanks,
Thank
Jeff.
you so much.
Absolutely. Until we talk again, you guys have a good day.
You too.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Good Neighbor Podcast Midhurst. To nominate your favorite local businesses to be featured on the show, go to gnpmidhurst.com. That's gnpmidhurst.com or call 705-413-3775.